Have you ever thought about how some days just feel ordinary? Just another date on the calendar. But what if I told you that a single, unassuming day could be packed with more history, more breakthroughs, and, yeah, more pure weirdness than you could ever imagine? Okay, let's dive into one of those. So here's a question for you. It kind of sounds like the setup to a really strange joke, right? You've got this fundamental scientific discovery, a pillar of American democracy, and, of course, one of the most iconic action shows of the 80s. What on earth could possibly connect them? And there's your answer. All of these seemingly random things, they're all tied together by one single 24-hour period, January 23rd. It's the day the discovery of X-rays was published, a key amendment to the Constitution was ratified, and yes, the day the A-Team premiered back in 1983. So today, we're going to dig in and see what a single date on the calendar can really tell us. All right, so let's do a quick spin through the centuries. We're going to keep our focus locked on this one day, January 23rd, just to see how much can really happen. Now, check this out, because this is where you see these incredible echoes through time. In 1737, John Hancock is born. The guy whose signature on the Declaration of Independence is so famous, his name literally means your signature. He was all about civic action. Then, fast forward over 220 years later to the exact same day in 1964. The 24th Amendment gets ratified, which banned the poll tax, removing this huge barrier and letting more people make their own mark on democracy. It's like two different centuries, one day, one big theme. And on that same day, science was being changed forever. Now, Wilhelm Röntgen had actually discovered X-rays a few weeks earlier, but January 23rd, that's the day his paper got published in Nature, which is one of the biggest scientific journals in the world. This was the moment his discovery went viral, you could say. It sparked the revolution in medicine and physics, and literally changed how we see the world around us. And the day wasn't just about politics and science. It was a huge day for culture, too. In 1849, Elizabeth Blackwell just shattered this massive barrier, becoming the very first female doctor in the United States. And on that same date, just a few years earlier, the great painter Edouard Manet was born, an artist who would go on to challenge the entire art world. Just think about that, pioneers in totally different fields sharing one momentous day. And just to prove that history has a pretty great sense of humor, yes, this really happened. On January 23, 2018, at a huge camel festival in Saudi Arabia, judges disqualified a dozen camels because they had gotten cosmetic injections to make their lips and humps look better. I'm not kidding. From constitutional amendments to camel Botox, January 23rd really has it all. So you see how January 23rd is this day of culminations, right? A birth, a publication, a law being passed. But if we only look at that final date, we're missing the real story. We miss all the struggle, the years of work, the dead ends that came before it. What if that final date isn't the story at all, but just the final page? To really get this, we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to look at one of the biggest medical breakthroughs in all of history, the first successful use of insulin to treat diabetes. And guess when that happened? January of 1922, right there around our key date. Now, this was not a problem that was solved quickly. As you can see from this timeline, the first known description of the symptoms goes back over 3,500 years to ancient Egypt. For millennia, humanity knew about this horrible disease, but was completely powerless to stop it. That final breakthrough in 1922, that wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the end of a very, very long road. And for pretty much all of those 3,500 years, this was the reality. The Greek physician who gave the disease its name described it in these just horrifying terms. Before insulin, getting diagnosed with what we now call type 1 diabetes, well, it was a death sentence. Simple as that. This is the team that finally changed everything. Banting, Best, MacLeod, and Collep. But their path to discovery was anything but a straight line. In fact, it was filled with doubt, a ton of skepticism, and, believe it or not, a healthy dose of pure luck. The skepticism they faced was just immense. When a young surgeon, Frederick Banting, went to Professor MacLeod, who was a big expert in the field, with his radical idea, MacLeod was pretty much dismissive. He basically told Banting, look, your experiment will probably fail, but hey, at least we'll learn something from the failure. I mean, that's the kind of doubt they were up against from the very start. It's really a story of the most unlikely beginnings. Banting wasn't some top researcher. He was a surgeon who was struggling to make ends meet. He wasn't given a fancy facility, just a small, run-down lab.
And his partner, Charles Best, he wasn't even hand-picked. He and another student literally flipped a coin to see who would get the summer research job with Banting. Think about that. A coin toss helped decide the fate of millions of people. But somehow, despite all the odds, this unlikely team, working through a brutally hot summer in that little lab, pulled off what you can only really describe as a miracle. This is Leonard Thompson. He was just 14 years old and he was dying of diabetes in a Toronto hospital. He was the first human to receive the team's purified extract. The very first injection actually caused a reaction, but after one of the biochemists, James Collip, refined it further, the second attempt was a stunning success. Leonard's blood sugar dropped to near normal levels. For the first time in history, someone was brought back from the brink of death from diabetes. And the news just spread like wildfire. In 1922, there were only about 19 scientific papers on the topic. Within just 2 years, as you can see, that number exploded to over 600. The world of medicine saw what was happening almost instantly. This wasn't just a discovery, it was an explosion of hope and new science. The recognition came just as fast. The Nobel Prize was awarded to Banting and the professor who had been so skeptical, MacLeod. But in this incredible act of integrity, Banting immediately and publicly declared he was sharing his prize money with his young assistant, Charles Best. MacLeod then did the same, sharing his with the biochemist James Collip, making sure the entire team was recognized for their world-changing work. Okay, so let's zoom back out. We've done the whirlwind tour of January 23rd, and we've done the deep dive into the long journey that led to one January breakthrough. So, what does it all mean? When we look at January 23rd now, we see it in a whole new light. Rontgen's publication wasn't just the sudden flash of genius, it was the result of meticulous, careful experimentation. Elizabeth Blackwell's graduation was the finish line of a long, difficult fight against prejudice. The 24th Amendment was the culmination of decades of the civil rights struggle. And the miracle of insulin? That wasn't a single moment in January 1922, it was the final, triumphant step on a 3,500-year quest. So here's the thing. We tend to remember the dates, right? The headlines, the finish lines. But the real story, the drama, the human struggle, and the triumph, all of that is in the long, winding, and often really difficult journey it took to reach that one single day on the calendar. It really makes you think, doesn't it? The next time you see a historical anniversary, don't just think about what happened on that day. Ask yourself, what did it take to get there? What are the thousands of days of struggle and failure and near misses that made that one day of success even possible?